think the thing about ceramics that I love so much is the really physical aspect of it. It's so physical and visceral, it kind of keeps you in shape, your body in shape, but you're interacting so directly with the material. I mean, physically interacting with it. So I've made this coil and I've scored the leading edge of it. So when I attach it to the existing form here, bring it around, and that scoring will help it stick together. We call it slip-in scoring in ceramics. So when you're just building, right, you're not even thinking about your idea, but you add this coil and something is already beginning to suggest itself. The thickness, the mass of this material has kind of a visual interest. So I might catalog that away later for a different idea. In the meantime, I want to get this coil on, but I love the way this starts to feel already. I'm not interested in a perfect form. All I want to do is create this rough form to work with. I'm going to really distort with my tools later, so I just want to create a nice basic cylinder shape. So when I'm making these forms, I like to leave these finger marks in the cylinder. Everyone that knows pottery will not understand these as throwing rings. So I want to use that language, let the clay have its voice in the work I'm doing, but it's also a texture or another element to the form, a visual element. It's obscured when the work is done, but you can see it. So when I started making these forms, they've got a couple different names, the different bodies of work, but all of them I'm thinking about root forms, the way that the pressure of roots from the inside out, and the outward material determines the shape of it. So very little touching from the outside, mostly pounded from the inside using these sort of wooden tools. Initially, knocking some shape like this. Varieties of areas. I try to be really, I try not to think about where and how, I just start pounding away. There's so much like visceral kind of interacting, pounding. I like to think of it like wrestling. Joke about it, it's like love making. There's such an intimacy between you and the material. And now I can just keep pushing with my finger from the inside out till I find shapes, bumps, forms, things that make sense to me visually. It's never enough, so I'm always adding more clay, always more and more. See how far out, how extreme you can get these kind of pushes and bulges. Sometimes it tears, look at that, tears and rips. I don't worry about it, I just fill it in. So this work has been bisqued already. Once I'm done forming these works, I coat it with a very special slip that interacts with the glaze, and I fire them to a fairly low temperature. And it's at this stage that I apply all of the glaze, pouring and then also globbing on, glooping on really wonderful runny crawling glazes or textural glazes. Sometimes it'll go through 3 or 4 firings before the finished product is. So this is a work I've just pulled out of the kiln, one of the cave vessel series. I've entitled this one Rainforest, obviously because of the green nature of the piece. Much larger scale, I'm starting to scale up. I'm trying to make them as large as I can to the limit of my ability to move them in and out of the kiln by myself. So when I'm glazing these pieces, once again, there's not a whole lot of forethought. It's in the moment, pretty visceral reactions, but of course I'm pouring and creating color, the base color. But then I start to construct, almost like building with clay, these blobs and knobs of clay. They're made into kind of patties or thick amounts of glaze that I lay in position, and then I let them melt and create pattern, things like this, different colors striped on top of each other, blobs on top. And then I let them, I give it its own language, its own voice. It does what it's going to do in the process of melting. So some are really viscous, that means thick, some are very thin and run quite a bit on these pieces.